Dent and the Conduit, and we're here with Mark Boatwright-Frost for tipping pieces, tipping pieces, or tipping points and puzzle pieces. Sorry about that, Mark.
Say that 5 times really fast.
Yeah. Um, Today we're going to have a discussion about, well, the handbook for building a community for doing
Yep.
what Roseco does. So take it away, Mark.
Yep. Okay. So, what most of you don't know, and Rob is just learning about me, is that and one of those two books about the last 6 months, and it's the what I call the playbook for building resilient communities. Would like to have something that they can to and read through and understand the environment they're working in when it comes to building resilient communities. And as I've been writing it, it's a real challenge because I start off with like, yeah, go invite your neighbors to have a potluck and break bread. And then I realize, okay, so if you're doing that, you have to look at this, and this. And it's not as easy as it seems. And part of the reason that people are resistant to it is because it's not as easy as it seems. So handbook has
Mhm.
become not only a handbook, but a philosophical and perspective overview of human relationship and connecting with other people.
Mhm.
And Rob has just been taking a look at it and how I've structured it. And yes, there's a lot of sports metaphors because a playbook should have sports metaphors in it. And we talk about you being the coach. Last week, when we talked about cognitive dissonance, we talked about um, being a community ambassador. And really, when we're talking about coach, it's the community ambassador. But with the playbook, we kind of played with the coach, the whole coach concept of it. So um, when we're talking about this, we're talking about you being the coach. And the idea is to bring your neighborhood together. And at the very first part of it, we talk about some of the challenges to that. And the reason we had the conversation about cognitive dissonance last week is the largest challenge you're going to have is cognitive dissonance.
Mhm.
How does that play out? How does that create an issue? Okay, so you think that your community should be resilient, and you may be on the more environmental side of that with climate change and the climate challenges, and you may have read some articles, and you may have been thinking that this is something that is a known thing, a common knowledge. And then you go talk to your neighbor and you say, we're going to have a get together and a potluck about building community resiliency. And your neighbor says, what does that mean? And you start talking about climate change. And your neighbor is not a believer or is on the fence about climate change. And he holds a certain belief system that conflicts with your belief system.
Mhm.
And what's going to happen is he's going to end up shutting you down and not participate. Now, that doesn't mean he is wrong. It doesn't mean that you're right. What it
Mhm.
means is you have a difference of belief systems. And we talk about how that happens in our culture and how it's more likely to happen than not to happen. So the handbook goes through, or the playbook goes through the process of understanding cognitive dissonance and the need to approach people in the most neutral way possible to build a relationship with them and not to judge them. They may hold different beliefs. They may have voted for somebody you didn't vote for. They may be a different religion than you are, but that does not make them bad people. That makes them different than you. And the difference is a strength because they see things in a different way. And
Well,
that's how we approach the book.
and that's, I mean, to have meaningful conversations with people. One, you have to come into it with that viewpoint. And I found this in my own life and in my own experiences that, look, I mean, and I've seen this in my family. And God, I know it'll be divisive saying things, but it is my parents being diehard Trump people. Okay.
Mhm.
And I decidedly am not. But if I want to have a relationship to talk to these people, I can't come at them with, well, you're wrong. No, that's not the right approach. There's got to be a common ground. We got to, I can have my beliefs and you can have your beliefs, but we can still build something.
And the part that I just finished writing is about your responsibility, if you're the coach, to create safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to take time for people to recognize that it's safe space and no one's going to judge them.
Yeah, there is that.
So you find commonalities based on our humanity, because under all of the politics, religion, racism, sexism, elitism, all of the various things, when we come right down to it, we're all human beings. Or as my father used to say, we all put our pants on the same way.
I don't know, man. I put them on backwards, so
Well, there's you, and then everybody else. But no judgment. Yeah. But the fact is that we have enough agreement on our own humanity. This seems to be an ongoing theme of the show. When you go to the supermarket and prices are 20% higher than they were a month ago.
Yeah.
And 30%, 40% more than they were 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that everyone is challenged by. And I'm probably going to take in the teeth on this because I don't have the facts right with me, but there's about almost 50% of the country, of our country, which puts you at about 150 plus million people, that are one paycheck, at most 2 paychecks away from poverty.
Well, and that is a true statement. I mean, to some extent, I don't have the exact facts either.
Yeah.
But through this pandemic, you've seen that the people are the one paycheck away. I mean, look at the skyrocketing homelessness. Look at the inflation that we're dealing with at this very moment due to the Ukraine things and oil. And there's no reason that it should all be like that, but it is. So, I mean, we can sit here and say, woe is me, or we can try to figure out an answer to the problem.
And we can't, at this point, we do not have the political strength or the consumer strength of being together in a grassroots network, which is part of the end goal, to change things. Mm-hmm. We can't tell Chevron or Exxon or any of the companies that stop this shit now. Sorry. Mm-hmm. We don't take it anymore, but we can affect them by carpooling. And if your neighborhood is together and you all sit down and say, well, these are our schedules, instead of paying $5 or $5.39 a gallon of gas, why don't we come together and I'm heading here, let's combine trips. And that alleviates the pain on everybody.
It does. I mean, it speaks to the idea of, I think it was last week that you and Marwan were speaking about like having a community truck.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in some circumstances, like doing construction and stuff, I can't go community truck because that's what I need to use. But I do understand and see the need and the purpose for that, because if you have a whole community, trust me, I mean, my dad for years drove an F-250 Ford, diesel, but still loves whatever fuel you're going to put in it. My father-in-law drove the same thing. Now, you're paying at the price they're paying now. I think it's $5.89 a gallon for diesel fuel.
Yep.
I mean, come on, man. That truck would be sitting, and it's, oh, look, Joe next door needs it, or so you all come together. Okay, I have the truck, but we can all afford that $5.89 if we all
work
use
together.
It that way. Yeah.
And combine trips. And
yes.
Like Joe next door and Roger across the street need to take their stuff to the dump.
Yeah.
Well, let's all get together and figure out what else needs to go to the dump and do it in as few trips as possible and get everybody taken care of.
Yep. Get it all taken care of at one time.
So that's just definitely one of the things you can talk about in a neighborhood where you can all come together that has nothing to do with politics or religion or anything else. Mm-hmm. Just helping each other. Community gardens is another thing that we're pushing very, very heavily, is because food prices are going up. But if a community comes and starts gardening in each other's yards and help each other weed and offset the time commitment to a garden, and everybody shares from the food, that reduces your food costs. That makes it a little easier for everybody.
Well, and I know. I mean, I know where you live, Mark, and I know where
Mhm.
I live, and I know that if they could even remotely be open to that idea, I mean, where I live, you're talking 12 families, okay?
Right,
So 12 families essentially in a courtyard type setting. Well, if you take that well, part of that middle courtyard, because kids do need somewhere to play, and there are a bunch of kids in my neighborhood,
right.
okay? But even if you take a portion of that and grow food in it just for that neighborhood, it is what you're saying. It's a community garden. I mean, so I go out there and I tend some tomatoes and I get tomatoes, or I get beans, or I get whatever, whatever herbs or whatever I'm growing out there, or corn or or fruits,
Right.
um, and I know, I mean, and in where you live, I mean, there's
All kinds of
300
green
plus.
belt space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of green belt space where you could take, sections and go, okay, you guys in this section have this garden. You guys in this section have this garden.
Right.
And it would take them literally. It's of no cost to the landlord. I
No,
mean,
and they're worried. They may be worried about, well, what happens when I've got barren earth? Someone will always want a garden.
yes.
Within the 20 people I know around us, there are people that would always be in the garden, working on the garden.
Oh, and I would ask. I mean, if you're going to have that area, is there some way to incentivize it where you can get the landlords on board, or the owners of the
We're
property?
already having that discussion.
Yeah, okay, so you guys are gonna get on board, so you get this benefit out of it, but you want to get the neighbors in on it too. So what kind of benefit do they get outside of the food? Because some people will go, well, I can just go to the store and buy food, because, well, we all know people are lazy. Okay, I mean,
Well, some are, some aren't, but we've been indoctrinated to be lazy
yeah,
and to be
yeah,
overwhelmed perpetually. Which is something I cover in the handbook or the playbook.
hmm
But yeah, some of the benefits to the landlords are this. In my area specifically, we have a lot of people that are less than socially responsible,
yes,
and we have dumpsters, and people abuse those. I took a picture of a guy pulling out in his truck after taking an entire truck of furniture and covering the entire area around the dumpster with it,
hmm
and turned it over to the maintenance people who dealt with it.
hmm
That takes the dumpster away from everybody else in the complex. I can't tell you how many landmines I deal with people with dogs who don't pick up after their dogs. And when I'm picking up my dog poop and there's piles everywhere around me because somebody else doesn't think that it's important to do so. These are things that are less than responsible social behavior.
yes,
If we start doing the gardens, it's a step toward peer pressuring the neighborhood to step up. And if you want examples of this, Boston had an issue with its projects 10, 15 years ago,
hmm
and they started creating another low income housing situation where people actually got to own their projects, and then they started creating places where people could own the projects and own the apartments in the projects. And suddenly things were cleaned up, things were repaired, budgets were made available to people to fix up the area, and now it's a shining example where because people have a vested interest in their own area.
Well, and there is, I mean, like you said, the vested interest. It is the pride and ownership kind of thing, and I think that's part of more what we see with. I mean, for years there's been a stigma of people on Section 8. Okay,
Right.
with that kind of thing. That, look, they're going to come in, they're going to trash this place out, blah blah blah, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a reason there's a stereotype or a stigma.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not everybody, you
No,
know.
and in the case that we treat, going back to the cultural issue of how we treat people on Section 8 or people who are struggling, let's just say that everyone is struggling. The
Mhm.
military people in our area are by and large on SNAP
Oh
because
yeah.
they don't make enough money to feed their families, pay rent, and everything else. I mean,
No.
that's telling you this is an endemic problem all the way across the board with the ability. We go back, actually, before the show, we talked about the crisis, the treadmill, the crisis, the broken promise, and the treadmill, which is
Mhm.
one of the paragraphs in the book,
Yep.
and where we talk about when you're a kid, you're put on a treadmill. You go to school, you start getting aptitude tests. Counselors tell you that you need to be a cosmetologist or you need to be this or that or the other. You're not going to do this. And they tell you what your future is. How can they possibly know when you're like 7 or 8 years old what your future is going to be, what your interest is going to be? Yet they have the arrogance to tell you that, and they put you on a treadmill toward wherever. Well, that treadmill has been increasingly going to university and
Mhm.
colleges, and so you collect a ton of debt, and you have a promise of a job with a good degree.
Mhm.
And that promise has been broken for over 20 years because those jobs don't exist. How many people do we know that have, bachelor's degrees or MBAs that are flipping burgers at one of the fast food joints?
That is a serious problem too. I mean, a lot of people out there are doing that, and I can remember. I mean, we're not so far apart in age that I can remember going to school and getting that aptitude test of
Hmm?
what are you going to be good at, and doing that, and that was, I want to say it was 11th or it might have been 12th grade. It was, that they did that test to see what you should be good at. Should you go to college? And of course, the military's there going, well, you need to come on in and take the ASVAB. Do I? I mean, do I really? And I mean, and I avoided it like the plague when I was that age, right?
Yep.
Until, well, I just one day decided to join the military and went and took the ASVAB. And I can tell you that to me, that test, I mean, it's supposed to be an aptitude of what you're good at. I really that test, it was just
It's
that. It
pretty
like
much useless.
yes, I mean
Yeah.
because useless to some levels. I mean, when I got through with the score on that test, they're like, "Oh, come on down. You can work on nuclear reactors." Does this look like the face that wanted to do that ever? I mean, you know. Outside the
Yeah.
fact that they're like, and I mean, in 1988, 87, 88, they're like, oh, we'll give you an extra 6 grand if you'll do that. Well, in 88, that, you're an 18-year-old kid. That's some money.
Yeah. I will tell you that in 78, 79, when I went down to talk to the Navy and the Coast Guard and I took all the tests, I aced them.
Oh, yeah.
And then they said, well, come on in. I said, well, I want to go to computer school. I said, well, we can't give you that right now, but if you come on down to do boot camp, we'll put you in the direction. I said, I have too many members of my family in the military to know that that's not a lie.
Yeah.
So, don't, I mean, if you don't want to give it to me, that's fine. I don't have to go in the military.
Yeah.
But that was the time that the draft was over and they weren't really sure what they were going to do with the military. I'm sure or at least I hope it's better now.
I would hope it's better now. I know I ended up not wanting to do, like I said, nuclear reactors. I ended up being a sonar technician, which was really interesting and great, electronics training and everything else. No complaints. Um, but it's kind of like listening to the recruiter, and I'm in Detroit, Michigan, right? In December. So it's the dead of winter. So I mean, there's 10 inches of snow on the ground. And this
Right.
guy goes, well, you know what? We can send you tomorrow to Great Lakes, just outside Chicago.
And why would I
Uh,
want to do that?
no. How about I said somewhere warm? Oh, well, we can do San Diego after Christmas. There you have it. We'll go there.
So you talk about being a sonar operator, and suddenly I flashed on communication. For those of you who don't watch older movies, and this isn't even that old, if you've ever seen Up Periscope with Kelsey Grammer, I think
Yes.
about the communications guy who was jury rigging the comms with holding wires in his toes and wires in his
Oh,
fingers
yeah.
and
Yep.
doing the electric shock to keep the comm working.
Yep.
Sorry, just sidetrack. You're saying sonar operator.
All
I'm,
right.
I'm
That's
getting that
okay. I get
picture.
it.
Anyway,
Well,
yeah.
that's
So
exactly
we
what
have a
everybody
broken
thinks.
we have a broken system. The only way we're
Mhm.
going to fix it is to start small. You can go
Yeah.
protest all you want. How has that been working for everybody? Have you ever seen any major change because of protests? Climate change is happening. I mean, okay, for all of all of you out there that don't believe in climate change, I'm sorry, but it's happening,
I,
and it's changing us every year, and
I
it's
would
going to
ask.
continue to get worse.
I would ask. I mean, if you don't believe climate change is happening, I watched snow fall out of the sky yesterday in the middle of April. Okay,
Yep.
I mean
And sleet and
literally,
hail and ice.
and hail and rain. And if you look at this storm that is coming through on us now, they're talking the end of the week. It's on the other end of the country, and they're talking 2 feet to 30 inches of snow
Yeah.
in April. I mean,
Yeah.
look at last summer. It was 120 degrees here in Washington.
Yep.
In Washington.
Yep. And for those of you who are like me, who don't like snakes very much,
Mhm.
I grew up in the high desert in Southern California. So sidewinders, right, diamondback rattlers, all kinds of pug uglies and nasties were part of my life
Oh
when I
yeah,
went hiking. Rattlers are moving north. They've been spotted in northern Oregon now. And the
great.
last thing I want in Washington State is a rattlesnake. We have
No,
garter snakes here. I'm fine with them. I don't really want an 8-foot diamondback rattler in my backyard.
I don't
I've had
really
that.
want snakes at all in my backyard, but
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the purpose of nature and stuff, but yeah, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I have a friend on Facebook who showed a picture yesterday of his home in Henderson, Nevada, where he was doing some plumbing work. He pulled a panel away, and there's a rattlesnake curled up under the pipes.
Oh man. I would tell you that uh, on the topic of snakes, I'm driving across country, okay? And this is just a quick side story, but driving across country, coming across Nevada, drive into rest stop, hear thump, 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 like speed bumps, right?
Hmm.
Pull up, get out, go to the bathroom. Now, this is middle of the night. Walk back out to the truck, stop and look at the sign, and it says, watch for rattlesnakes. Literally on the pavement because it's nighttime in the desert,
And
right?
they're there because the pavement's radiating heat.
Yes. And pulled back out, and it was thump, thump, thump because those were snakes I was running over that were on the pavement.
Yes.
Yeah, it is no joke. And I mean, me being from Michigan, yeah, because I grew up with snakes so often like that. I didn't even think about it. But man, I saw that sign. It's like, what the heck were you thinking, Rob? Just walking straight on through. Do, 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 do. Yeah,
At least you didn't. We can go on and on about that.
yeah,
I grew up in the high desert. Tarantulas, scorpions, all
yeah.
of that stuff were part of my upbringing, and no wonder I kept moving north, farther away from snakes. I think about New Zealand periodically because they have no snakes in New Zealand,
Oh, yeah,
and I'm thinking, well, God, what a beautiful place, and they have no snakes. I'm
yeah.
sure they've got lots of other stuff though.
But if you roll over to Australia, isn't it the most poisonous snake in the world lives there?
Yeah, they do. So we'll switch off of that subject because I can go on about
Let's
that one
move
for a while.
along.
Um, so the playbook is about creating change on a small scale, starting
Yeah.
with your neighborhood, and not preaching to people, not judging people, but bringing people to the same table and sharing food
Yes.
and creating safe space so that you can start conversations about shared humanity. And if that's too esoteric, well, maybe the book's not for you. But we have to start doing something, and we have to start doing something together. And that needs to start locally because big efforts don't work. Or if they do, they work over such a slow period of time. We need to get people talking to each other every day. And we've got to be able to do it no matter what the diversity in the situation is. Matter of fact, the more diverse it is, the better the outcome is going to be. And that's a conversation that needs to start happening.
Yes. It is. Um. It it's like you said. It's starting on a small scale, and it is being able to talk to not in your neighborhood to make a community, but you have to start with at least one person so that you can build it out from there because it is a small scale. You have to talk to the guy right next door, the guy across the sidewalk.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
build it.
and locally, if you're local and you get involved and you want to develop this, Marwan, who's also the president of G2, he's the president of our board of directors, and I are working on coming up with a fund so that we can actually host a barbecue for you and take some of the pressure off. see if we can find some local musicians to come and actually have a block party.
Well, yeah, because I mean, everybody likes food, for one. And food is, I mean, it's a good common ground for people to get together and have a conversation.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea. And I believe I heard that the two you were talking about, that Marwan's neighborhood was probably going to be the first neighborhood.
Yes. Well, he wants that to be the case.
Yes. And well, sometimes he tends to get what he wants.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I'm still working and having conversations with mine, but they're very open to it.
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm working on developing the resources so that I can bring a big barbecue pit in here and feed people from the parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's a lot of people in that neighborhood.
yeah, there's hundreds of units. I'm not entirely certain how many there are, but there are lots.
I can tell you by fact, because I've done a few roofs there, 300.
300. Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, and everyone I've talked to is very interested.
Hmm.
And so what we need to do is make sure that the management is okay with it. So far, the maintenance people are good with it. The management is good with it. We should be targeting somewhere in the June timeframe.
Oh, that'd be
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. By the way, I wanted to do a shout out today. South South Sound Sustainability Expo is this Saturday from 10 till 3. And we will be there talking about the Kitsap Resiliency Project and the handbook and the things that we do. So please swing on by and come see us. It's hosted by the city of Tacoma. This is the 14th annual one. We were at the 5th annual as well. So this is the first time we will be back since then.
Well, you've grown since then, I would assume.
Yeah, far different. We actually have
Yeah.
our own booth set up and everything now. So we will, Terry and I will be down there. We're expecting a couple of people to drop by to cover. I hear Rob and Stephanie may or may not drive by because they have some stuff to do down there. But I hear that the food trucks are going to be fabulous and they're going to be doing sustainable foods.
Okay.
And I know that they've got a lot of entertainment things going on down there. And that from my first time there, the booths and expositions are actually pretty interesting. And a lot of good speakers talking about what they do to help the environment.
Okay.
But we still need to come together in our neighborhoods before we can actually adopt anything. So I'm going to tell a little story about my history here.
Yep.
Before Resilient Ecosystems, I formed an organization called the Clean Technology Trade Alliance, where I spent 10 years validating and learning about clean technologies or supposed clean technologies all over the world. And I talked to people in 12, 14 different countries that were approaching things in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you this with a straight face that 80% of them were smoke and mirrors, or somebody trying to sell something that has been around forever and calling it green, so greenwashing it. But the 20% were vital and needed to be adopted and haven't been yet. And I've been doing that since 2001. One of the reasons Resilient Ecosystems came about is because there are solutions to critical problems we have now, like power and water and sewage and transportation that have been around for decades that we need to be applying. But we're never going to apply it as long as the cities and the corporations are working together to keep the same old in place. We updated a wastewater treatment plant about 7 years ago, I guess. Spent $60 million doing that. We upgraded so it had reached 2/3 capacity, and the law says that it needs to be under half or 1/3 capacity, so that you have that extra room. And we're not even going to talk about the fallacy of the stormwater being in the same facility as the wastewater, which causes it to flood into the sound repeatedly and continually. But just the fact that they all they got for $60 million was an increase in production capability of about 1/3.
So you spend $60 million to I guess, rejuvenate the system, okay,
Right.
or upgrade it. What's the cost effectiveness? Say you go the other way and let's just get rid of it and go with the newer technology that works better.
Well, here's the thing. So let's say that wastewater treatment plant can handle conservatively 30,000 homes.
Okay.
Okay. And it's centralized. So you've got pipes running and pumping stations going to different places all over their region.
Mm-hmm.
So you have multiple points of failure.
Yeah.
And in a true crisis, like a major quake, it would take months for us to address those points of failure.
Yes.
Okay, so there's been a technology around. I won't even call it newer. It's been around for 40 years. They apply it in lots of places on the East Coast. We
Mm-hmm.
have one plant in Okanagan. It's the size of a house.
Okay.
You can put it in a development, and it can handle 1,000 to 2,000 homes.
Okay.
It's about $5 million. It can be solar powered, and it can be set to take two things. It can be set to bring water back up to a potable level, gray water up to a
Okay.
potable level and drinkable level, which might become a real crisis issue shortly.
Yeah.
And two, it can be set up to filter out methamphetamines and pharmaceuticals, which no current system can be.
Yeah. So, okay, you're talking $5 million, 2,000 houses. So, conservatively, that's what 24,000 houses for that $60 million versus
Yeah.
the conservatively 30,000 at that point. But you're also
Well, 30,000 for the whole plant, and so
Yeah,
we're talking about you're talking about 15,000 is all you're getting for the 60 million.
Okay. So the 60 million, it would make more sense because you have less failure points if you're putting them in a neighborhood. You don't have these long pipelines. You don't have all the other. So you've removed all those obstacles. Yes, you'll still have failures in the neighborhoods. Don't get me wrong, because I mean, inevitably.
But a power failure may not cause the plant to fail if it's running on
Exactly.
solar.
Yeah. So now I guess it has to come back to, it is that grassroots challenge then to get the people behind it, because the government's never going to do this. Let's not kid ourselves. The government, we got what we got. We like what we got. We're going to keep throwing money at it. Why should we get new?
Change is not what the government is about.
No.
And it never has been. Never
Yeah.
will be. It's not its job. So it's up to us to drive the change, and we have to come together and agree that this is an important change.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
as long as our toilets flush, what do we care, right?
Well,
Until
they don't, and then we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's a pretty situation.
Yes.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of things like that. Germany has gone heavily into renewables because they've gone off of nuclear after the Fukushima crisis.
Yeah.
They have come up with technologies and growth that our power companies who are for profit and don't want to invest in upgrading the grid because it takes away from shareholder profit will tell you that it's immature yet. But Germany's running 65 to 80% of their country off of renewables at any given time, and have been for the last 7 years.
Well, and that's great that Germany is. And I mean, I think that if you tried that at a state level somewhere like, say, Michigan, which is roughly the size of Germany, it may very well work.
Yep.
But how do you convert that to a country the size of America?
Why don't we start with a neighborhood?
Oh, well, yeah, there is that.
Build a grid, build a microgrid in the neighborhood. And actually, Tesla and several, and I shouldn't just say Tesla, but I don't remember the names of the other three companies, but Tesla and with their Powerwall, and three other companies who have competitive products, and I'm sorry, I'm only saying one, have created a virtual microgrid situation. And I put a video up on the Kids Up Resiliency page by Matt Farrell that talks about that, where they're actually paying him back for sharing some of his peak power to the microgrid, the virtual microgrid. And then he gets that power back later with his solar, and he gets a check. And I think he said that this year he will get somewhere about $2,000 to $3,000 back
Yeah.
from that virtual microgrid, which is paying for half of his Tesla Powerwall.
So I mean, I know that Tesla, obviously, they had set up their model village in California or
Right.
town, right, with the roofs and the solar power and the walls and the whole thing. Um, I guess I know that technology's come a long way, but is it to the point where it is sustain? I mean, and I guess I should ask better is I know Hawaii has gone to solar power on one of their islands, and they're using the Tesla, the Tesla panels and everything else. How is that working? Because that is a large scale test.
Extraordinarily well. And when you've got companies and German companies like Siemens, all
Mm-hmm.
in on this, they're
Okay.
all in. So here's the difference between Germany's thinking and our thinking. Our net metering incentive program
Mm-hmm.
is set for you to be grid tied.
Okay.
You can get the payback from the PSE on your house to be grid tied, which means all the power generated from your house goes into the grid.
Yeah.
So if the grid goes down to a power outage, you're as dark as your neighbor is. All those solar panels are doing you exactly no good.
Now, why would I want to do that? You know what I mean?
Because, well, they do that because doing it as a standalone or an off-grid system, you have to jump through an enormous amount of hoops. Because
Okay.
it was written by the power companies to keep them from having to invest. Also, the amount of power that you're generating on your house is unusable to the power company.
Yeah.
And there's not enough investment. But net metering is the way that we have set up in this country to set it up to be grid tied. If we started doing microgrids in neighborhoods and changed the priority to power the house first, the
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood second, the grid third,
Yeah.
it changes the entire thinking. And then instead of having X amount of solar panels on a roof to minimize the cost of putting them in, you put them on every bloody roof facing every direction because at some point light's going to be coming in and generating power.
Yes.
And when you do that, you maximize the income of power and storing it, and then you share it amongst the community. So whoever needs power pulls from the community power grid and feeds their needs, and then whatever's left over goes to the grid.
Yeah. Which makes better sense.
Yeah. I mean that's efficient sense. That's not.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there's all kinds of things like that make sense. When I was working with Clean Technology Trade Alliance, IHS, which is a humanitarian organization that had offices in Mexico, came to us about food. The state of Chihuahua had lost 80% of their agriculture due to climate change,
Mm-hmm.
desertification.
Yeah.
And they had an outmigration of over 100,000 people that went to Juarez, which created the Juarez social crisis and the crime crisis that we all know about today.
Yeah.
And by the way, Juarez is a lovely city. I've been there several times when working with Clean Technology Trade Alliance, and it's a lovely place. It's not a big city in the U.S., but it's kind of cool, and the people there are very nice.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working to look at technologies to put together a grow center that would allow them to reestablish agriculture using 10% of the water that you would use for just standard agriculture, and to clean up the water sources as the water came in, and to recycle the water as the water came in. Those have been in available for production for 7-8 years now, 9 years, and we could apply those here in Kitsap County and start growing our own food and have food security. The average fruit, as I've said multiple times on the program, travels 900 to 1,500 kilometers to get here.
Yeah. There's no
So
reason.
one hiccup in and we don't have food on the shelves.
Well, I guess a couple questions. We'll start with my first one: solar technology. I know as I was growing up, as you were growing up, solar technology was I need the brightest sunshine I can find.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that is not a true statement now because it is a viable option here in Washington, is it not?
It is. It is.
I mean, we're gray and we're rainy a lot.
We're on the same latitude. Latitude is the horizontal one, I think. Yeah, as Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And Germany's running 80% of their country off of solar. Also, the $8,000 Powerwall that people are looking at to buy from Tesla, there are other options out there. Now, lithium ion, which is what the Tesla and a lot of the other companies are based on, is a very expensive technology because lithium is hard to find. and
Yes.
it becomes a geopolitical issue with countries that have lithium that we may not want to do business with.
Hmm.
Okay, so there are saltwater batteries. Saltwater batteries have been around since Egypt was,
Yes.
pharaohs and such.
Hmm.
Um, but there are new parameters of saltwater batteries. They're big, so you can't carry it in your phone, but they'll work fine in a community. They're about a third less than lithium-ion batteries. They last longer, and they can discharge down to zero and be recharged up. If they start losing their power, you change the salt water.
Well, see, and that was going to be my question to you when you said saltwater batteries is what are their capacities versus the lithium ion type battery? And I know battery technology, they have pushed and pushed to make it go further and further because again, it's pushing that same premise for running electric cars.
Right.
I mean, I can have me an electric car that goes 300 miles. When electric cars first came around, look, if you give me 100 miles and I
330.
got to charge,
Yeah.
if you give me 100 miles and I have to charge it, I, that's a push, man. I mean, and the kind of driving we do around here at G2
Yep.
because of transportation. 100 miles. I mean, would I love an electric vehicle? Yeah, but 100 miles just ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah. My average when I'm driving last week when I was driving for you guys, I think one day I was like 85 miles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm looking at the newer vehicles as the battery technologies got better, and plus they've got the braking and everything else. Everything's adding into kinetic to recharge that battery when you're driving.
Right.
You know,
So where would you charge it?
the only place to charge vehicles at this point, well, here personally, from what I saw when we went out and test drove them and stuff, it would take forever to plug one into the wall right here and charge it.
Yep.
But I could go over to Fred Meyer. They've got the pumps there. Or
What about the garage across the street? Do they have charging stations?
yes, but that's Navy owned, so I don't know if
Oh,
we can get in there.
okay.
But again, we're talking a rapid charge, and it's what is it, 45 cents a kilowatt hour, and it's essentially. I mean, at the time we looked at it, this was before gas prices went out to lunch, but it would take us about $55 to fill up our van, and to charge similar, I was looking at about 43.
For a fast charge. And I take
Yeah,
it your landlord wouldn't put charging stations out back.
and no,
See, that's
I would not
the
say
problem with electric cars is mostly the technology. Now, if we
yes.
so let's talk about an animation I saw almost a decade ago at the German Trade and Investment Conference when they were already in the process of revisioning what Germany's going to look like.
Hmm.
They had it set up so that you have a charging station as part of the renewable energy um, model in your house and your home,
Yeah.
and so your car becomes part of the charge and discharge of powering your house. When it's not being used, it feeds the house and the house's needs for energy. And when it is, when the house is not used, like middle of the night, it charges your car.
Yeah.
So it's a software that does that, and it becomes a part of the overall ecosystem as opposed to an one-off that
Hmm.
you have to change your thinking on.
Yeah. Like I said, electric cars, they're interesting. I think a hybrid might be a better way to go now until the technology gets even better. And that's my own personal opinion,
I
you
agree.
know. Um, but the technology, I mean, even in the last decade, has come a long way from what
And
it
it's
was.
going to and it's kind of going to come more, and we can talk about where that could go on another show.
Yes.
Um, at some point, we're going to have to tackle that show, but not today.
No,
Anyway, if we want any of this to happen, people are going to have to start talking to each other.
they are. They are. And
And for those of you who are listening that might see us, might bring your children to the Sustainability Festival, close your ears right now because they asked us for a question that kids could ask us, and the question we gave them was, what are the first three words in the U.S. Constitution?
We the people.
And with all of the other BS that has happened politically,
Hmm.
that hasn't changed.
No.
And the trouble is that we, the people, are so diversive and apart that we look at every little silo and every little thought as separating us and making us different. But at the core, we're all humans.
I would agree we're all humans, but I would also, as we were talking about before the show, with that divisiveness, with those silos, with everyone separating us, well, we come back to easier to control, easier to get the way they want. They don't want the change and they want to keep us quiet or in the dark or whatever way you want to put it.
And that's been going on for generations and generations and generations and thousands of
Yes.
years. Matter of fact, I will say that there's a quote by Aesop. You remember him? He's the
Yep.
one that was in the end of the Peabody and Sherman cartoons when we were kids.
That's right.
And he was about 600 before Christ, or before Common Era is what they say now. And he said, "United we stand, divided we fall."
Yes. And that's the truth.
And our culture has been doing a fine job of creating that division. Now it's time for us to choose not to be divided any longer. But we have to learn that that's an option, and that's going to take time. And part of the name of this program is tipping points, which is when you reach a tipping point where change occurs. And puzzle pieces is because this is a framework that we all bring our pieces to, and it shows a picture that is inclusive of all of us and our thoughts, and a future that has to be that. Now, I tell people it's not a conspiracy theory because the people who started this conspiracy are so long dead that there's not even dust in the ground anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a playbook, and it's a playbook that's been run continuously for thousands of years, getting more and more refined until we're at this point, looking at our demise, quite honestly, in the next 100 years if we don't change what we do. So the book that I'm writing that we're talking about today is a playbook for change.
Yeah.
It's a playbook to counter the other playbook.
Yeah.
But it starts from the grassroots up. It starts from the very bottom of making relationships and helping people find their humanity and basing the work that we do on the needs of those. Now, I mean, your parents voted for Trump. I've had conversations with lots of people about why they voted for President Trump. And by and large, the answer has always come back that we could not stand any more of the same old that we've been getting. And you know something? I can't fault them for that. I don't think that that was a good choice. That's my personal thing. But the choice of his opponent was even more heinous to me.
Well, here it is. I mean, honestly, in all the years I've been able to vote, I have watched that every choice that you have it's one or the other, and it's bad or worse.
Lesser of two evils.
Exactly. It has always been the lesser of two evils. Now, do I agree with the choice like we were talking about with my parents? No, but that's my opinion. Did I like who was running against him at the time? No, and that is also my opinion. But there's no viable third option because we're stuck in this system that is two-party because, yes, they offer you other parties, but have you ever seen a third party ever do anything?
With the Electoral College, you can't. No third party will ever get elected.
No.
It can't happen.
Yeah.
But that's just a mathematical function. You've got to look at the math of anything and figure out that that's true.
Yeah.
I will tell you that the very first time I voted was the last time I voted and felt good about my vote.
You know, I would tell you that I would agree with that statement. But again, at that time, it was a different era and it was a different time. And, you know, no matter what you say and how history looks at it, everybody loved Bill Clinton then.
Well, and I go a little earlier than you. My first vote was for Jimmy Carter. And I think history would show that he is just a good man.
I would agree. I would agree that back with Jimmy Carter, that he was never going to win the Iran deal with the hostages. He was never going to get out of it.
Nope.
That you can hang that on him however you want to hang it on him, and that they were gonna capitulate and give up when the next president came in, because they were going to prove a point with Carter.
Yeah,
You know?
and that was a shame, because that was a chance that we actually had to have some really negotiated peace.
Mhm. Well, and look back at what Carter's done. I mean, you've spoke numerous times about Habitat for Humanity, and that is his organization. Him and Rosalind started that,
Yep.
and look what it's done for the world. So it's not that he was a bad man; he's a good man, you know.
He's still building houses, and he's in his 90s, has had cancer and strokes and all kinds of
Oh, I
things,
know.
and he's still out every day building houses.
Yeah,
And I'm just like, you cannot. There's nothing you can say that wasn't countered by history.
yeah, yeah. So,
So anyway, that's that, and so we need to come together. That's the point of
yeah,
the book. The book is
yeah,
the how-to. Now
yeah.
here's the news. The book will be done in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I'm guessing. I'm making good progress, but again, every time I write something, I think about what surrounds it, and I have to spend some time talking about what surrounds it, because what we want to give you is a real perspective of the
Yeah.
challenges and the ways to overcome them. And that's the only fair thing to do. We will be offering it on Patreon, and here's why. One is we need to be supported in the work that we do. And Patreon, it makes the most sense because we work for you. And we could spend all of our time chasing money and doing grants and all the rest of the stuff, which we'd rather spend. If we're going to do grants, we'd rather do it for a specific project like the grow centers or something that goes in the ground that benefits everybody. For our organization and working forward, Patreon is how we work. That's how we get funded. And if you become a subscriber to Patreon for $20, you can download the handbook or the playbook. But you also get, if you are a continuing subscriber on Patreon, you also get us consulting with you, answering your questions, which is huge and
Yeah.
far more than you're paying every month at $20 a month to become part of it. Is that I or Terry or one of us will be talking to you about helping you through that process. We will be working on building in Kitsap County. We will be working on building resources to help you have block parties. So that's
Okay.
kind of our overall philosophy. Again, that will be coming up. It'll be live on Patreon. We'll be doing a complete launch on it, probably in early May.
Okay. Well, I would
Don't worry, Rob. You're going to get a copy anyhow.
Oh, well, I don't doubt it. I'll see it at some point, one way or the other.
Right.
I mean, but I would say, please come out, support, help. Rosecco with the Patreon. The book is well worth the time in the read. The information is invaluable, and the one-on-one time is, you're not in this alone.
Yeah, we're here to help you. I mean, the goal is, yes, Patreon helps support our organization and keeps us moving forward. But the goal is to get everyone together in a grassroots network that moves forward. And we figured a lot of the pieces out, but we need your piece too. We
Yep,
don't know what we don't know.
exactly. Well, Mark, we are coming, as always. This hour seems to go quick when I watch or when I end up guest hosting. So
Yep.
we're coming to the end of that, and I am going to give you the chance to say whatever you like to say, and we'll wrap this up.
Actually, I want to read a section from the book, or actually, I'd like you to read a section from page 7.
Page 7. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, page 7.
Yeah. So this is a poem by Martin Niemöller. It was written after World War II,
Okay,
talking about the Holocaust in Nazi Germany. And I'd like you to read that one and then the variant I wrote below it.
okay. So it is, why should we come together? First, they came from the communist, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. I was not Then they came from the socialist, and I did not speak out because I am not a socialist. Then they came from the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I am not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So this is Mark's variant on that. To take a look at it, it says, let's take a look at this. Look at it this way. First, they came for the black people, and I did not speak out because I was not black. Then they came for the gay people, and I did not speak out because I was not gay. Then they came for the Japanese people. That is what we did in World War II, and I did not speak out because I was not Japanese. Then they came for the Democrats, and I did not speak out because I was not a Democrat. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. That is the way of it. I mean, that, how else do I explain that? It is, if you don't speak up and help, then there's going to be no one left in the end to stand up and speak out at all.
And it also shows that today is not so different.
No.
We're doing that. We are othering people right, left, and down the middle to keep us divisive. And that is something we've got to stop doing. The natural model of the universe is diversity. Embrace it. Don't fear it.
Exactly. Well, with that thought, I am going to say have a good afternoon, folks. We'll see you next week for tipping pieces or tipping points and puzzle pieces. I will get this right one day, I swear, Mark.
Yep.
And thanks for viewing. I'm Rob Dent. That's Mark Boatwright-Frost. See you next time.
See you next time.